Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, history's greatest hoax. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction. Not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon are listed among the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the only one of the 7 for which no physical remains have ever been found, for which no Babylonian text of any kind makes any mention, and whose very existence is disputed by serious scholars. Every other wonder on the list is either physically preserved, extensively described in contemporary records, or both. The Hanging Gardens are attested only by Greek and Roman sources writing centuries after the fact, in a city they never visited, describing a structure for which the civilization that supposedly built it left absolutely no documentation. Was the most famous garden in history a fiction, or was it real, but located somewhere completely different from where everyone has been looking? The evidence points toward a shocking conclusion that rewrites one of history's most enduring stories. The Hanging Gardens were real, they were spectacular, they just weren't in Babylon. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the broader phenomenon of lost civilizations, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. The ocean has a long memory. As the last ice age ended around 12,000 years ago, sea levels worldwide rose by more than 120 meters, enough to drown entire coastal civilizations that may have flourished along shorelines that no longer exist. The continental shelves that now lie submerged beneath shallow coastal seas were once habitable land. River deltas, bays, and estuaries that today lie underwater were once the most attractive real estate on Earth, rich in resources, temperate in climate, and accessible by sea. If ancient peoples built their settlements where resources were most abundant, then much of the archaeological record of early civilization may be sitting on the ocean floor, invisible to conventional excavation. This is not speculation. Marine archaeologists have already found submerged ruins at dozens of locations worldwide, off the coasts of India, Japan, Cuba, and the Mediterranean islands. In some cases, these structures are clearly artificial: stone walls, carved steps, and rectilinear platforms that could not have formed naturally. The academic debate is not whether these structures exist, but what they mean. Were they built by unknown pre-flood cultures, or were they coastal settlements of known civilizations gradually abandoned as waters rose? The answer, in many cases, remains open. What oral traditions add to this picture is equally significant. Cultures living on or near the sea throughout the tropics and subtropics carry remarkably consistent flood narratives, stories of a great inundation that drowned an earlier world. These are not borrowed from one another through colonial contact. They predate European exploration. They appear to be independent memories of a shared catastrophe, the end of the last ice age, when the world coastlines changed forever and entire ways of life were drowned. The civilizations that built on those shores, if they existed, vanished beneath the waves. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns, in science, demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, history's greatest hoax, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Not a single Babylonian tablet, inscription, or administrative record from the Babylonian Empire mentions the Hanging Gardens, despite the meticulous record-keeping of Babylonian scribes who documented everything from grain deliveries to astronomical observations. The administrative archives of Babylon recovered by archaeologists are extensive, yet the gardens appear in none of them. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, writing in the 1st century BC, described the gardens as built by Nebuchadnezzar II for his Median wife Amides, who missed the green hills of her homeland. The Roman Jewish historian Josephus and the Babyloniarcha of Berossus also mention the gardens. But Berossus was a Babylonian priest writing in Greek for a Greek audience, and his account appears to describe something he had not personally seen. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. Oxford scholar Stephanie Daly has proposed that the Hanging Gardens were located not in Babylon, but in the Assyrian capital Nineveh, built by the Assyrian king Sennacherib around 700 BC. Cuneiform tablets from Nineveh describe an extraordinary garden with a sophisticated irrigation system, including a water-raising device resembling an Archimedes screw, 3 centuries before Archimedes was born. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, Sennacherib's own inscriptions describe a wonder for all people's garden at Nineveh, with trees from every corner of his empire, exotic plants, irrigation canals, and mechanical water-lifting devices that watered the elevated terraces. These descriptions match the classical accounts of the Babylon gardens almost detail for detail. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the confusion of Babylon and Nineveh in classical sources is historical. Why documented? Greek writers frequently used Babylon as a generic term for Mesopotamian civilization, in the same way that modern writers sometimes use New York to mean America. The specific conflation of Sennacherib's Nineveh achievements with the Babylon name would have been easy and is well precedented in ancient geographical writing. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. Botanical analysis of the plants described in Sennacherib's garden inscriptions suggests an extraordinary horticultural project. Trees from mountains, lowlands, and foreign countries grown simultaneously, requiring a climate-controlled terrace structure with continuous irrigation, precisely what the classical sources describe as the Hanging Gardens, located in a desert climate where such a garden would be truly miraculous. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations. And in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, history's greatest hoax. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the Hanging Gardens never existed and are a literary invention, possibly confused with the real but less spectacular palace gardens of Nebuchadnezzar, inflated in oral tradition and then crystallized in classical texts. The absence of any Babylonian record is, in this view, simply absence. The gardens were not built, not recorded, and not real. They represent the ancient world's appetite for marvels rather than genuine historical record. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the Hanging Gardens were real but located at Nineveh, built by Sennacherib of Assyria, and subsequently misattributed to Babylon by Greek sources who lacked reliable geographic knowledge of Mesopotamia. This is Stephanie Daly's well-documented hypothesis, supported by cuneiform textual evidence from Nineveh describing exactly the kind of elevated terraced garden with mechanical irrigation that classical sources attributed to Babylon. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the gardens were real, were in Babylon, and were built of materials that left no archaeological trace: wood, brick, and organic material that simply did not survive 2.5 millennia of Mesopotamian flooding, erosion, and occupants. The lack of physical remains is not surprising for a primarily organic structure in a region where the water table is high and preservation conditions are poor. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, history's greatest hoax, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes cuneiform tablets from Nineveh recovered by archaeologists describe Sennacherib's palace garden in detail, including water-lifting devices, exotic plantings, and terraced structures with canals. The first known description of an Archimedes screw, predating Archimedes by 3 centuries. Use D for garden irrigation. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented. Topographical surveys of ancient Nineveh have identified a series of substantial terraced platforms near the palace complex that could have supported the kind of elevated garden structures described in both the cuneiform tablets and classical accounts of the Hanging Gardens. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the Babylon excavations led by Robert Coldwell between 1899 and 1917 uncovered a large vaulted structure in the northern palace area, which Coldwell identified as a possible location for the Hanging Gardens based on its unusual water delivery system, though later archaeologists have questioned this identification. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, history's greatest hoax. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Stephanie Daly's proposal that the Hanging Gardens were at Nineveh has gained significant scholarly traction since her 2013 book on the subject. If she is right, the misattribution lasted more than 2,000 years, a reminder of how easily historical facts migrate between locations in ancient sources. The gardens also represent something important about how ancient wonders were created and remembered, not always as precise historical records, but as monuments to what was believed possible. Whether in Babylon or Nineveh, someone built a garden of sufficient magnificence to survive in human memory for 2.5 millennia. That achievement, wherever it occurred, is real and in some sense more remarkable than any ruin. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, history's greatest hoax, from the historical record through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Hanging Gardens ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.